Welcome to Eviecast, the podcast from us, the charity Team Evie, which hopes to educate, raise awareness and inspire you. We release an episode each month and share stories of families we've helped, along with interviewing health professionals and more. This month we chat to Gillian Green, who was a sister on the intensive care unit where Evie spent the majority of her life. We chat to Gillian about how she got into nursing, the start of her career and how she got into PICU, and the impact that her work had on her personally and her colleagues caring for the sickest children in our region. We also chat about Team Evie, our relationship with the unit and the impact of our work that Gillian saw firsthand. So much to cover, so little time. Here's Gillian. Hello Gillian, and thank you so much for joining us for the third episode of Eviecast.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. I feel quite privileged.
Oh, that's nice. Well, we feel privileged to chat to you. You've done so much for our family personally and we've known each other for so long. It'd be nice to actually sit down and have a proper chat. I thought about that this morning in preparation, that we haven't, you spend so much time with people as a parent and a nurse in hospital, but you don't get to sit and chat for an hour to actually understand each other. So it'd be interesting to do that. I thought a good place to start might be with you just telling us about how you got into nursing and the start of it all for you.
Okay. So I used to read the Twinkle magazine when I was a little girl, and there was a character called Nurse Nancy. And I used to like the fact that she had her little beds in a row, and I used to play that game. And then it was something I always wanted to do. And at school, I wasn't like a great academic. So I can remember a teacher saying to my dad, Gillian will never be a nurse, she'll never get the grades. So in these days, you just kind of took it on, that was it. You just sort of thought of it. Left school when I did all my full years at school and worked for the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I was there 2 weeks and I thought, what am I doing here? This is not what I want to be doing. As much as the staff were lovely, the job was important. I looked after stocks and shares and things like that for the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I was like, no, this is not for me. So I started to look further afield from Edinburgh because the grades that they wanted were really high. So I was brought up in Edinburgh. And I spent a lot of time in Dumfries and Galloway when I was a child because my aunt and uncle lived there. So I applied to Dumfries and Galloway College of Nursing and Midwifery and I got in. And, it was a little bit away from home, but it was actually the most amazing 3 years of my life. I met my bestest friend, I met a really good group of friends, and I had a fantastic training. And like Maria, that was in the days where you did a bit of everything. So when you did your sick kids, so that was a registered general nurse, that wasn't in sick children's. So I did my sick kids placement, which was only about 4 weeks, and I can remember it really clearly. And I thought, this is kind of what I want to do. I don't know why, but it was what I wanted to do. So then finished my nursing, went back to Edinburgh, worked in A&E in the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh for 2 years. And then I converted to do my sick kids training at Sick Kids in Edinburgh. So you did 18 months. And then I finished that and I got an interview. So I went for my interview. I can remember the two people that interviewed me, and it's as clear as day. And I thought I was going for an interview for burns and plastics. And that was my favourite ward on Sick Kids. So I was sitting there giving it all the spiel, really happy. And then they told me at the end it was for PICU. I was like, oh, I didn't really enjoy that placement. But my placement for my PICU was actually, so in those days you had to go to Simpson's Memorial, which was a special care baby unit. So it wasn't something I really enjoyed. And looking back, that was probably because of the intensity and it was pretty intense. Anyway, so I got offered the job. So I fell into PICU completely by default. And so I started my nurse training in 1988, and then I did my sick kids 93 to 95. So I worked in PICU from 1995, starting at Sick Kids in Edinburgh. Met Michael, my husband, on holiday, moved to Newcastle in 1997, and the rest is history, really. So I worked in PICU up until 2024. So I was there for 27 years. starting as a band 5 and working my way up to a band 7. Um, so yes, and I have seen the world of PICU change massively
I
since I
bet you have.
started in 1995. So yeah, yes.
Wow. Okay. I mean, bless you. Fancy getting told you'll never make the grade and then going on to
So
do
that,
that
yeah,
many years at the sharp end of medicine.
so there's the story. So when I worked in A&E, you used to have to go out to the waiting room and call somebody's name in. So I went in out with a piece of paper and I called a girl's name and the surname Seller. And so I said the name and up stood the teacher that said I would never be a nurse. And I
Wow.
said, "Hello, Mr. Seller." And he looked at me and I said, "So I made it." And he said, "Well done," and he was pleased for me. But yeah, yeah. So yeah, I look back and I think, people that don't, judge a book by a cover, just because you're not really academic doesn't mean to say that you can't
Absolutely.
like make your dream. And so yeah, yeah.
I thought it would be really interesting to hear from your perspective and experience about PICU because I think it's something we struggle to put across that to people. You know, we spent 6 months in there with Evie,
Hmm.
but you can't explain it to people who haven't been there, and people can relate to a visit to A&E
Hmm.
and what that feels like in hospital, or visiting relatives, or spending time in a ward themselves. You know, maybe having an operation or whatever it might be. But there's such a small percentage of people who've actually been inside an
Yeah.
intensive care unit that can actually relate to it. So I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from your perspective,
Mhm.
I guess a description or to talk about PICU and what it's actually there for and what it's like to spend so much time in it.
Right. So I'll explain what PICU is and kind of the best way to sort of like start actually off with it is like thinking about your first day, my first day actually working on PICU and like what you walk into. So every parent's going to walk into that situation and it's a bit like, oh my God, what is this? Because there's monitors, there's ventilators, there's pumps, there's all this massive equipment, and then this little child, baby, anything up to, in PICU can be anything up to 18 years old, depending. Um, that age group's a bit fluid,
Mhm.
but your little baby in amongst all this, and then you've got a family that are just looking as if to say, what is this all about? So PICU in Newcastle it has a massive geographical area. And that's because we're in the northeast of England. So the next one up the way is up in Edinburgh, and the next way down the way is in Leeds. And obviously we have right over east and west. So we're most east over to west, and that's where your family, like Evie, came into that because
Yeah.
of geographically where you lived. So it takes in a huge geographical area, and not just that, because there's some specialities within the Great North Children's Hospital. We have families that come from all over the world. Um, Ireland, Saudi Arabia. So there you get a whole realm of like different like sort of cultures, ethnic groups coming into PICU. So PICU is a ward, all right, and it's quite unique place to be. And in Newcastle, there's one where Evie, well, in fact, Evie was on both the PICUs. She was in the cardiac ward, which is at the Freeman, and the one that I worked on was at the Great North Children's Hospital. Um, which really the children that come there vary with what they come with. So it can be congenital abnormalities of children that are needing support with that. You can have trauma, it can be medical. So, your respiratory illnesses, like maybe somebody that's fallen and hit their head, or your little ones who come with that are born that they have like congenital abnormalities. So there's a real mixed bag there going on. So you kind of become a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. You've got a little bit of everything. And historically in Newcastle, we used to be, the medical and surgical side used to be split, but we came together in 2010 and had one big PICU. So you come up to level 4 and you walk through the doors and you've got a parents' room on the right hand side and then you come through another set of double doors and then you walk down a big long corridor. And I sometimes used to think to myself, wonder what it's like walking down this corridor for families. And there's pictures on the walls, trying to make it welcoming and everything. Then you press the next set of double doors and then you walk into PICU. And you have what I used to call the bottom and the top end. Other people have it the other way, but the bottom end was like Evie's end. So I used to you walk in there, and on the left-hand side, there's 4 beds. Then you have some cubicles, then you have more beds, then you have more cubicles. And then there's another area which we used to call the 3-bedder, which is opposite, which mostly got opened in the winter time for the overflow of respiratory children. And yeah, so there's 18 beds altogether. And I think that sensorily, there can be a lot of sensory overload when you walk in there. You could walk through the doors and it can all be calm and everything's okay. You could equally walk in and it'd be maybe a bit like a war zone actually, like noise, people rushing around. If you've got an emergency, people coming in through the doors. So no day's the same. It's all very different. And I think that, you really do have to sometimes stop and think, what does this look like for a family, for a mummy and a daddy, for grandparents, for everybody in the family, for other children. And I think on PICU, we used to try our best to make it as welcoming, as homely, as I would say gentle, sort of quieter as you could, but that's not always possible, unfortunately. So yeah. So working on there, I worked there for 27 years, and I felt that, there's a lot of staff. There's over 100 staff. That's nursing staff. Then you've got your medical staff. Then you've got your physios and your OTs and your dietitians, and then you're visiting medical staff. So in a day, a family might not necessarily engage with all these people, but they see all these people, and that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's all. Yeah, yeah,
it's crazy as well. As a parent, you sort of look at everyone as a team, or as if everyone all gets on and you all know each other so well, and everything's so. I don't really know how to explain it, but the more you spend time out of that situation, you think, well, it's a workplace, isn't it? And actually, there's so many people you couldn't possibly have known them all or known them all well, and wouldn't have got on with them all, which is just human nature. You know what I mean? You
yeah,
can't. There's so many different people. As a parent, there's nurses like yourself who we got on with really well and are still in touch with
mhm,
11 years later.
mhm,
And there was people we really didn't get on with just because we never would have, as apart from the situation and the stress and the trauma and everything going on, we're just different people.
yeah,
But to be in that, as you described it, war zone, which I've heard so many times, I can't possibly relate to somebody being in a war zone because I've not been in one,
no,
or.
no,
However, I understand that comparison of at any second anything could happen in
yeah,
PICU, which sounds really dramatic, but that is, we experienced that with Evie, that you just sort of thinking, oh, she's not very well, or something's a bit off today, and then bang, like you're in a massive emergency where the red handle's pulled and
yeah,
people are rushing around your bed. It's really difficult to describe that, but trying to work in it and work as a team with people who you possibly don't know must be
yeah. And
challenging.
I think when we obviously have different levels, don't we? So you have the nurse caring for the child. So you'd have your bedside nurse that was caring for you and Evie, and then maybe my role where I'd maybe be the team leader or the nurse in charge. So there was lots of different levels. And when you talk about not getting on with everybody, that is very true. That's true in life, isn't it?
Hmm.
But you know, every morning, and I'm sure I could speak for a lot of people, you go in the changing room, you take off your clothes, your mum, your wife, your Gillian clothes, and you put on your uniform and you put that professional like attire on and you walk out and you speak to everybody, you deal with everybody in a professional manner. And the most important thing that I used to always feel was that you were, even if you didn't maybe agree or there was like little things, the most important thing was that, and what you're saying, Greg, is that you saw a team of people working together and professionally, like doing their best, because the most important thing in any relationship is trust. And we needed you to trust us to care for Evie. So that is the most important thing as a nurse, in any relationship. It's about, okay, so I know that if this person or that person's on, I know I'm happy about, and I feel that trust and relationships there. Um, if there was anything, and I mean, there are people coming that you don't know, like, sometimes people would just arrive, like certain like teams, and you'd be like that, and who are you? And I'd go, do you know, I'm the nurse in charge. If you just come and see me and da 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 da, because at the end of the day, I wanted to know who was visiting the unit, what family they were going to see, to make sure that, and coming down to the next thing, communication, like to make sure that communication was smooth, that what they were saying is what you were hearing, and then because as a nurse, you're actually sometimes the middleman. You're the person
Hmm.
that gets all that information because it's come from a medical person, or maybe the nurse that's caring for the family. You get that information and you absorb it, and then you are able to sort of maybe iron out issues, or, affirm like information, so that the families are empowered with that information, and they don't feel like they're not involved.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get onto communication in a minute. It really made me think. Yeah, I mean, I suppose any big organization, like I was a teacher before
Yeah.
in my life before, and it really just made me think of then, which I always think is so realistic on Nativity, the film,
Yeah.
when he goes into the head teacher's office and she says, "Oh, you've got a new teaching assistant starting today," and he just sort of goes, "Oh, okay." It's like that's the type of thing that happens, that you're going to work thinking you know exactly what's happening, and then before you know it, you've got a new student and you've got this person
Yeah.
and that person, and your
Yeah.
day is totally altered. It sounds
There
like
weren't,
that's
there
you.
weren't many Mr. Poppies.
No,
I mean, maybe there was, but
yeah, maybe one or two. Um,
yeah.
but that you're caring for the sickest children like you say, in across a massive area. So there's only 18 beds. There's only 18 spots
Hmm.
to be taken
Hmm.
in there for the 18 most critically ill children across our area.
Hmm.
And while you're trying to cope with all the things that can happen every second, get on top of the chronic cases or the long-term plans, and coordinate all of the different teams and all the different opinions and all the different situations that are happening, and then somebody new arrives at the bed and you think, who's that?
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
got a different opinion, but you don't know who they are or why they're there or what. But you've got to present it as a team and slick and smooth to the
Hmm.
parents.
Hmm.
Um, but you don't think that as a parent. I don't think you just think, well, surely you all know each other. You work at the hospital, don't you?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so we'll get on to communication.
Hmm.
Because it's a big passion of mine, and I know we've shared on our social pages a bit about the talks that I do here, there, and everywhere.
Hmm.
Which the slicker the title of that talk gets is about collaboration and communication,
Hmm.
which sort of interlink and work together.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to really chat about your experiences of that, because we, in our time with Evie, had a varied experience. Okay, so as you say, we were cared for between a few different hospitals,
Hmm.
and the most positive experience we had was with you in PICU.
Good. That's good to hear.
And the best example or way I can explain the impact that had on us, which is tough, is that when we got to the end of Evie's life,
Hmm.
we had to have that conversation that actually this is where we are, and these are the decisions that need to be taken, and this is what we're coping with and dealing with.
Hmm.
And the way that we responded as parents to your team was
Hmm.
to feel like us together were doing our best to look after Evie for the best way to manage it for her,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think's down to 6 months of good communication.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that communication and relationship and collaboration,
Hmm.
or if I'd had that conversation in another hospital where we weren't cared for as well, I would have felt like that was being done to us, and somebody was taking a decision to do something to us, and the end of Evie's life was being forced upon us.
Yeah.
But because of the great relationship we had with so many of you, it
Hmm.
was us as the sort of as Team Evie, if you like,
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to come to terms with what we needed to make sure that we looked after her the best we could.
Yeah.
But that isn't easy,
No.
to do it correctly for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I have my own opinions about what was good, but it would be just interesting to hear. You've
Yeah.
obviously looked after a lot more families
Yeah.
than us. How you
I
see it?
will I will be honest and say we didn't always get it right.
Hmm.
And I think that sometimes that comes down to like the families as well, in the respect. So you and Jill were very engaging. It was easy to look after you. Do you know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? Because, and it was always a pleasure. It was just that kind of, and you wanted to know, and you made it easy for the staff as well because we had a two-way conversation. And like you say, it was like a little team around Evie, and that included you and Jill. So that made it easy, and it's not always that easy. For lots of different reasons. Some people might not, it might be a much more acute situation. You had that longer like spell of time with Evie, and it was that workup, wasn't it? To where we kind of got to at the end. Whereas some families, you might be in a very acute situation. You come in and you've got 24, 48 hours and you're having these conversations, or some families don't want to actually, like recognize that we're at the end of their child's life. So that makes things difficult. And I think that, we as a hospital at the Great North Children's Hospital, they recognised that a few years ago. So and in PICU, especially with our longer term children, we recognised that we needed to improve our communication. So we started, one of the other sisters and myself, we did a long-term pathway. So it was a long-term patient pathway. So really they had a team around them. So they had a named consultant, they had a couple of nurses that were named, and then bringing everything together. So that was on the back of not such a good experience for families. Um, but like I say, I think every family comes with their values, comes with their their life experience. Um, and not everybody's easy to look after. So, but that doesn't mean to say that communication from the nursing and medical staff was ever any different. It was just actually the approach to it and actually maybe breaking down those barriers. I never felt we had barriers to break down with you and Jill because you were always really honest. And that's sometimes where the things maybe fall down, is like that communication isn't good because either one, the communicator, and that might be the nurses or the medical staff, and that might come from inexperience, fear maybe,
Mm.
um, just like, we know best. We don't always know best. I think that things have moved on a lot, and it's more about collaboration with the family. And I think that for me was always quite pivotal in what a better outcome. Because yourself, if you don't feel good about a communication, like if you have not even an argument, but you don't feel right about it. It doesn't sit right, does it?
No.
So if it doesn't sit right, and especially from the nursing side, you would feel really awful about it. And I mean, I've had those situations, and thought, oh my goodness, I didn't do that very well. But I've gone back and said to, a parent, I'm really sorry that didn't go well, and actually acknowledge and be put your hands up and say, I didn't get that right, and so that you can repair that trust and relationship. And, I have seen a lot of bad communication, but I've seen more good communication. And the bad communication, it's really important that people are brave to say, to to speak up in that situation.
And that's tricky as well, isn't it? Because it does take such confidence all around, or bravery, or from some, like you said, and I'm well aware because we're friends with so many of you that we were known to some, maybe if not all, as a difficult bed space, because we asked questions, or we were honest, or we asked why that was happening, and it wasn't that all communication was perfect, because I think about, this is something I talk about in my little 8 words talk, or big talk, that we had situations where we'd have a respiratory plan
Hmm.
at the point where everything else was fine for Evie. It was just a case of managing her lungs, and the respiratory team would say, right, this is the plan. We're not going to touch the ventilator for 2 days, and then we'll alter it, and then we'll do this, and we're all sticking to this plan. And then the consultant on PICU would change the next shift, and they'd come in and just change the ventilator settings because they thought that was best.
Hmm.
And we'd be sat thinking,
Yeah,
that's not the plan.
yeah.
And so the communication even between the different teams wasn't always great, but it's
Hmm.
that interpersonal stuff that makes a difference, and how you speak to it, and getting on with each other, which I can see isn't always easy with everyone, because like we said earlier, all humans are different, and
Yeah.
all humans react to stress
Hmm.
differently. So you might have parents who would normally be really easy to chat to, who, when they're in the worst day of their life, suddenly are aggressive, or what,
Hmm.
um,
I think what you're kind of saying there about, there'd be a plan and then it would be changed.
yeah.
Yes, I saw that, when I worked in PICU. And you know what, like, we talk about the 6 C's in nursing, health and social care, we talk about the 6 C's, and I used to say to like the staff, so we'd have a plan for the day. And like you say, somebody would make a plan, then somebody else would come in and change it. Like looking back, and now that you've said that, it's about that person who's making that change. I've decided to do this, and then give you a reason, communicate with you, instead of just like you thinking, oh my God, they've changed that, but that wasn't the plan. We're not doing that till tomorrow. And it's about, sometimes it's not, it's sometimes managing that person. So, I spent a long time with you when Evie was in hospital. So there are characters that we know that would, it was my way or no way kind of thing. And that's quite difficult to manage because, I could go as a nurse in charge and say, A, B, and C, this was a plan, but it's changed. And I don't think you've communicated that to the family and things like that. But some people, well, that's my plan. That's what I'm doing. But they wouldn't, and sometimes it was around time. Like, they wouldn't then go and say, oh, actually, I recognise that I've done that. Now I need to go and speak to Greg and Jill. It was just like that. Then the next thing would be happening. So they'd be moved on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think that time in the world of like health, there's not enough of it.
Oh, of
For
course. Especially like in the sharp end, where, like you say,
Mhm.
anything could happen at any minute, and you're taking a really good time to mull something over, talk about it, make a educated decision, and then there's an emergency, and that's gone, and because you've got
Yeah.
that to deal with. But I often talk about how, if I was to offer a unit the world's best surgeon, it would be crazy if they said no. Oh, we don't want her working on our unit, thank you. You'd be sort of like, what? But every parent is the world's leading expert in their child,
Hmm.
and they're sat at the end of the bed, and they can be missed out of that communication and out of that team.
Yeah.
And and it's really tricky as a parent because well, I know some do, but we didn't have any medical training or background or experience or knowledge at all. We were just trying to learn as we went along off you. But you hear things and you see things because we were there however many hours a day. So we'd be in one hospital or the other hospital, and Evie's SATs target would be whatever, 70%.
Mhm.
And then she'd get transferred back to you guys and her SATs were in the 90s.
Yeah.
So that used to baffle us because we said, well, yesterday we were sat in a different bed space and it was totally fine and she wasn't really to go above the 70s and today she's not allowed lower than 95. So somebody's not communicating that.
Mm.
And it's the same set of lungs at the center
Mhm.
of it. What
Mhm.
is the best management for her and
Mhm.
who's talking to each other
Yeah.
about it? Because and no one's talking to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I mean, do you know, like I said, I've been around for a long time. So when things have evolved, and so parental responsibility, involvement in children's like care has evolved as well. So when I first started, the doctor said something, and as a parent, you just went, yes, doctor, and
yeah.
that was it. Okay. So that has evolved and it continually evolves. And that's through social media, through parents, like education. And it is important that the parents are pivotal and at the centre of their child's. I mean, we talk about family-centred care. So that's what family-centred care is, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah.
So we have, things have evolved. And I think, when when you're saying that, woman sats, goodness, bing, bing, and oh my God, there's somebody getting boxing up. I can
Yeah, yeah.
just like see the whole scenario like playing out and things. And you're right about that communication. And I think, the long-term patient plan, I think that helped with that kind of communication. So, having like coming from another hospital, coming from another ward, we used to get quite a lot of ones from Skaboo through into, it was the management of these like parameters, their parameters, aren't they? Like, that we're accepting that because of ABC, whether it's to do with like their lungs, their heart, it's about like, so that I felt was something that is kind of like looked at and is important now. Um,
Yeah, and I see, the more I think about it, I think that interpersonal stuff's so key, isn't it? Because there is all this, there all the as to who's the treatment plan and the things that are changed and how and when that's communicated. But getting on with each other somehow is the key, and what's what worries me about Martha's rule
hmm,
in that I think it should be all about culture and
hmm,
everyone working together, and it
yeah,
worries me that it's more procedural and having a phone line and having a protocol to follow. For people who don't know, Martha's rule is has come into force and it's something new in memory of a girl called Martha who died, who possibly shouldn't have, whose parents were raising the alarm that they weren't happy with the care she was receiving and weren't
hmm,
listened to.
hmm,
And now anyone involved in a child's care should be able to get a second opinion, whether that's a parent or a medical professional. But I think that if everyone communicates clearly and the culture's good, like I've explained it was with you guys, you wouldn't get to that I don't know what, a big argument, really simply put.
yeah,
The thing, like you said, you guys didn't always get things right. Things went wrong with Evie. I can remember various situations where she got a wrong dose of medicine
hmm,
just because people are human and they calculated it wrong or what, and they just came and said, "So sorry, this has happened," and it's fine. But it isn't great, but it's just what happened. But because of the communication and how we got on and how we communicated with each other,
hmm, hmm,
everyone dealt with it, and you sort of say, "Well, we'll move on." But if you haven't got that positive culture where you're all caring and working as a team, I think that's where problems come from. But
yeah.
maybe it's just me.
I don't, because I've left the hospital now, I work in the community. Probably I haven't really engaged much about, I do know why it came about. And actually, it worries me a little bit, like, when you're saying that about, like you say, like, and the bit that worries me the most is that a health professional's not happy with something and they want to escalate it. And exactly what you're saying, come on, like, why can you not go and speak to an individual and just say, I'm not happy about like this for and give your reasons. And I hope on PICU that that's not really needed to be used very much. I can see from a parent's point of view, why that might be, and it might just be that there could be you know, the situation in that sort of here and now, they don't feel that it's been dealt with well, so maybe they want to, like, sideline to somebody else. Like I said, we've said, Greg, not everybody gets on, and somebody might think, I don't, we never ever got into the realms of, I don't particularly like that nurse. I don't want them looking after my child. That was never something that, we would manage that, and kind of try and explore it. And we would do our best to sort of like support the family and some of their wishes, but that's not always possible. We're there to care for their children. But I think that, you can have some strong characters that, like I say, it's my way and that's the way I want it, but actually it might not be right. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of, yeah. And I still keep in touch with people from PICU, and I know Martha's Law is being rolled out. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky. It's funny, it just made me think then about how getting on with people, and not that we made that request, but it's so stressful waiting to see what nurse you've got. Oh, man, and you say if, I don't, you said there's over 100 staff, but over the months you're in, you obviously go through quite a lot of them and get to know them.
yeah, yeah,
So you'd be like, whoever, you've got on really well, and you think, oh, they said they were on all the nights this week. Like, this could be us. They could be on
yeah,
5 nights. We could have them. This is going to be brilliant. And then they'd walk in and go to a different bed space, and you'd think, oh, no.
yeah.
But,
And that's all about, I think it's about skill mix, isn't it? It's not about like punishing anybody, or
oh, no,
it's
exactly. And,
all
and,
about,
and
and
often, yeah,
but yeah,
that's it. Often it would be a good thing that you didn't have that nurse if it was the best nurse on the unit, because they were having to look after somebody who was in a
yeah,
worse situation than you, and I get all that complexity. But on a human level, you sort of don't care because you think, well, that person's really good crack, and
yeah,
they're great at looking after Evie.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
everybody can't have what they want, like you say. Um,
yeah.
I thought it would maybe be good to talk a bit about Team Evie working with PICU
Mhm.
and the link that we've got there, because
Yeah,
you are Evie's home in PICU,
yeah,
and it was where we started to support and our biggest
mhm.
unit really. So just I thought it'd be nice to share a bit of that, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, um, you guys came back and we started with our little well, our big library actually. And the impact of that is just, it's quite amazing actually. Because I used to always say, you'd like do your little introduction and go, oh, we've got this lovely like library here. And it kind of like just broke down that, because when your children are in PICU, quite a lot of the time they're sedated.
Yeah.
They might even be paralyzed. They, you need quiet. So like music might not be appropriate, but actually just like sitting, reading a book, like either if it's your favorite book or if it was a child's favorite book, just that quiet time of reading a quiet story. Like it's amazing. And like as nurses as well, I remember one girl, she was a little bit older, and she had quite complex needs. And I remember going and getting a group of some books, and I took them. I says, right, which one would you like? And she said, chuck that one, chuck. And because I knew which one she wanted. I knew exactly which one she wanted. But I left that to the bottom. And then we got to it. And like I remember sitting on the bed with her, like it was a lift and flat book. And it was, I think it might, I can't remember what it was. But anyway, sitting reading this book. And honestly, like just before she went to bed, and like she just loved it. And like the smile on her little
Ah,
face. And do you know, like the other ones were lying on the floor? I hate to say, give them a
oh
wash
no,
and
that's
put
what
them
they're there
back
for.
on. But she knew exactly what she wanted, and I just think there's such a range for everybody. Like some of the older children, parents would come in and they'd read a chapter to them, or And like some of those books were just like books that parents enjoyed.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they, like themselves had like, the Harry Potter books or, the Roald Dahl books, because they had good memories and they just wanted to share those memories with their children. So that in itself is just, yeah, I think I love the book appeal. I love books myself. That was my big thing with my boys because it wasn't a big thing when I was growing up.
Right.
But yeah, it was, I just love it. And I know like this year I mean, my boys are 25 and 26, but I still donate a little book and put their name on it. Roll on, grandchildren. I can put their names on. But yeah, I think it's a precious thing, a book, and you know what you can get out of it for both of you, just having that time. So that was the sort of
Oh,
first
it's
big
lovely to hear.
thing. No, it is. It's amazing. Um, and then and families used to, and I know families have like got in touch with you about things like, like from the library and things, but I do think families used to, it's just something you could like little visitors, like siblings and things. You used to go up and pick a book, and they'd go and get a book, and then they'd come back to their bed space and maybe sit with their like sibling that was like poorly in bed and things. I think it covers all bases. I've even seen some doctors sitting reading a book to
Oh,
children.
well, there you go.
So yeah, and then do you know like when we knew you were coming, I used to when I was on, I used to think, oh, you could go in and it could be the worst and darkest day, and then you knew you guys were coming, whether it was Easter or Christmas or bringing some toys in. I don't know, it just used to brighten the day for me.
Oh,
Honestly,
that's
I
really
used to
lovely to
just,
hear.
and just like seeing your lovely girls and Jill and just, oh, I don't know, it just, yeah, I'll get all emotional, sorry.
Oh, bless you. Oh,
And
well, it's funny. So I can understand, people used to say to us when we first started coming back in about families who could never go back.
mm,
And I understand that. However, it's the place we feel the closest to Evie.
right, I can
And
imagine.
not so much anymore, but certainly for quite a long time when we first started coming back, I had the real feeling that you could just come in, as again, difficult to explain, but you understand that there'd be times when you'd say, well, we'll just get her settled or we'll get her sorted out before you come through.
Mm,
I felt like I was waiting outside for that and that you were just going to come and say, oh, do you want to come through? She's ready.
mm,
Even though she
mm,
was obviously wasn't there.
mm, mm,
Felt so, I love it. I love being in PICU, and I'm sure there's not many people in the world would say that. Um, so yeah,
yeah.
we love coming back and visiting and helping where we can.
I think it's, just I think for other families, whether it be, just that they've just come in for a short visit or for a long visit, it's kind of like them knowing that other people have been through, especially like in the like a child that's like going to die or has died and like Evie, that actually there's still you can still have a life and you can still, you coming in might sort of say to them, gosh, they've got through this and they can do this and come back. I mean, there's some families, I remember looking after a little one and dad said, I'll never come back to Newcastle. And that was a huge thing. I was like, whoa,
Right.
because it was so traumatic for them. And to be honest, if I'm really honest, going back to PICU for me now would be really difficult. I've been away for 2 years and you don't actually, I don't think people probably know the impact of caring for all these children, for all the children that some leave and some don't, the impact that has on you as a human as well. So I think you're like so brave, but now that you've said you come back because you feel close to Evie, I completely understand that. There's another little family come every Christmas, and they asked to go near where she was, and if we can
Right.
do that, we used to do it. I always seem to be on shift, and I'd looked after them at the time when their little one like died. And actually, I used to have a sense of like I used to go and be with them. It's just a sense of peace. And I think maybe that's because just for them, knowing that they were in that kind of place where they could
It's
get
okay.
besides me, be with their little like child, their little person, and just have that memory where sometimes it was bad, sometimes it was good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
You're all right. It's funny. It's it is home.
Mm.
for some people, eh? Like, and
Yeah.
and and for Evie, certainly, like that was her home, and we got 3 weeks at home with her.
Hmm.
But when she got really ill and we had to rush her back, and she was brought back into PICU,
Hmm.
bed space 4,
Bed space
um,
four, yep, definitely.
um, her face lit up, like that, like, oh, thank goodness I'm back here. She had no interest in being in our house. It was, just to be in there was like in among the nurses that she loved, and all the familiar sounds. I mean, blimey, you must get used to the alarms and the doors banging and people
Yeah.
wanting keys, which seems to be
Purple keys.
an endless thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's home for so many people. I guess
I
especially when
think
you're in
it's
there from birth.
yeah, and I think, like and from a nurse's point of view, it's actually kind of home as well
Yeah.
because you spend a lot of time there. You spend a lot of time with your colleagues, you spend a lot of time with your family. So it does feel like kind of home in the respect of it's you're constant. You have to get up and you have to
Mm.
go to work and things like that. So it does have that element as well. But yeah, we can walk out the door and go home to our own families. But there is that sort of, well, you try to make it as best as home as what you
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was interesting what you said there. I thought it was worth picking up on about that people don't understand the impact that it has on you looking after all these families.
Mm. Yeah.
I don't know if you're happy to elaborate on that because I think you know, and probably not helped. This is probably controversial, but probably not helped by the pandemic where everybody talks about nurses being superheroes.
Mm.
That actually you get this picture of somebody in a medical uniform that they are a bit invincible or bulletproof and that they're just going to work and they do that and then you could easily sort of go, right, well, I'll change out of my scrubs and I'll go home then. No problem. Whereas actually you're not a superhero. You're a human who's very caring and compassionate who
Yeah.
gets impacted a lot by what you do.
Yeah. So actually, the things that I just remember in COVID, we walked John O'Groats to Land's End for Team Evie. On our steps,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
We had our little map up on PICU. But yeah, so obviously I've been nursing for a lot of years and you don't really realise it until actually you kind of stop.
Right.
And so obviously um there are some families that you look after and their little ones died and you you go through the process and you've done everything and you hope you've done your best. I always used to think, I hope I've done my best for that family. But I always there used to always be a little bit thinking, could I have done more with the resources that I had?
Yeah.
Um, but there's some families that will stick in your head and they will be there till the day I'm not here anymore. And there's things that have happened that have made me make big life decisions. So, when I met Michael on holiday, I had looked after a little boy and sick kids in Edinburgh since he was born. And I came back from that holiday and we had a very close relationship. Like his mum was, there all the time. Um, they were, dad was Greek, mum was from Edinburgh, but anyway. And I remember coming home and I got a phone call and I hadn't gone back to work and one of the girls had told me that he had died and mum wanted me to go up to the hospital. And I remember the conversations and where afterwards the two of us sat down, she goes, life's really short. And I thought, no, you're right. And that's when I decided I was going to move to Newcastle. I'd only met Michael in September. I moved in the March. So
Uh,
that was a bit, and I thought, yes, you're completely right. And that little boy, like the impact, I've got a picture up here on my bookcase of him and me.
uh,
And I remember the day he was born. I know his name. I probably used to know his MRN number, but I think I've forgotten that now. And
yeah.
so, these little people stay in your heart, they stay in your head and your heart. And I think, and up until, the last child that I looked after on PICU that died, I looked after him with one of the other nurses. And I actually got a phone call when I was on my break from my mum that day to say that my auntie, who was my godmother, had died. And I did think to myself, I went and told the nurse in charge, and she said, "Do you want to carry on?" And I said, "Yes, I do, because this is what my auntie would have wanted, and this is what I need to do. This is important for this family, and I'm
Yeah,
here today as a nurse." But it was hard.
I bet. I
It
bet.
was really hard. And I took myself off to the chapel like afterwards. And I think for me personally, and this is not everybody, but I have like quite strong faith and I have all my life. So that's what's kind of been that's kept me going. And that's not to say that I haven't shed many tears.
Hmm.
And there's like, there's certain songs and there's certain things that you it just pings into your head. So it is hard, and like Maria on the podcast before, she talked about debriefs and like with the Poons nurses and like the cup and things like that. I don't think we were very good on that in PICU, if I'm really honest.
Okay.
Maybe it's different now. I don't know. Where we talk about it, but I do have a really good set of friends and we all worked in PICU. So, we'd go and have our coffees and things like that. But sometimes there was just never enough time, and you sometimes put that little mask on because you don't want to like it could just because it could take over your life. And I did used to sometimes think it's not my grief, but actually we do grieve.
Of course it is. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, we do.
and like I said about Evie, and we've always referred to you guys as her family.
Mm,
And that, and you grieve for your friends, your family, people you know well, and you're so invested, aren't you? That's where you're so connected to the children, isn't it? You're so invested in doing everything that you can
yeah,
to get them as well as you can,
yeah,
or if you can't, to make sure that they're cared for
yeah,
in the best way possible that they need.
yeah. I'm just like I'm just thinking about like that these superheroes and things like that, and that's when it kind of came out in COVID, and we were like we were fortunate on PICU that we didn't it wasn't a busy time for us, but I know that there were some of the staff used to go to adults and look after families. And that was really, really like difficult because do you know the most difficult thing that I've ever probably done in my life as a nurse? I remember the matron coming and saying to me when COVID started, "Gillian, you're going to have to go around and tell the families that they can only have one parent at the bedside." And I was like, "What?" And it just blew my mind. So I took myself off to the sluice as I used to do when I needed to think and breathe. Had a little 5 minutes to myself, and then I came back, and I remember going to bed 18 and saying, not bed 18, bed 16. And I approached the bed, and the mum knew what was coming, but she actually thought I was going to ask for them both to leave. And I said, "No, no, 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 just one." And the relief on her face, which made me think, well, maybe it's not that bad, but it was bad. And, as always, families were at the centre. We had this conversation, and I said, whatever parents there or whatever family members there, they're going to have a break. So we came to the sort of decision that we would be able to swap them over.
Yeah,
Um, and it was the right thing to do because it was something that we've never dealt with, isn't it, in our
yeah,
lifetime? But of all the things, it was just felt really hard, like saying that to like having that communication of all the things that I've dealt with at work. It just was like, whoa. But when you're with a family and you're at the end of their child's life, it's it feels a privilege, and it feels like you're kind of the catalyst to support the parents, help them get through that initial time, because that's all we really do. Unfortunately, there's not the bit afterwards. That's not what we deal with on PICU.
mm,
So we do the best that we can, like I say, with the resources that we had to make it as good a death as a passing as we possibly could or we can. And I think, we have obviously like the hospital has like now got, I don't know if you've heard of chips, you'll have heard of
Yeah,
chips.
yeah.
So they have chips now, which is like they come and meet families when sometimes we're in this situation and they carry on that care. There's the bereavement team is a bit more robust. So I think that there's more positive stuff now, possibly than even when, Evie like passed away. So I think that that can only be a positive thing, I would hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of different topics there.
Uh-huh.
But we always try and end, which would be
Mhm.
really interesting to hear your thoughts on this because of everything we've talked about in terms of how you got into it and the experiences you've had and how you cope in various ways.
Mhm.
But we got through every day by thinking of our little motto of always moving forwards and what can we do for Evie to get to the next operation, to the next day, to get her more comfortable, to get her happier, whatever it was. We looked back on every day and said we've made progress, we've moved forwards.
Yeah.
So I wondered what, if any, if you had a motto or a saying or a mantra or whatever that is to you that you stick to or think about that helps you or helped you, whatever it might still be something you do now or when you were
Mhm.
in PICU.
Yeah. I think what I kind of like think about is that something that's like for everything in life, it can be to do with the day, it can be to do with the seasons, it could be to do with, mental health, physical health, like death, birth, everything. And my little thing is like, at the end of the darkness, there'll always be light. And I think that's comes through with my faith as well. Like, that for me, Jesus is my light sort of thing. So it's just about kind of thinking, you know, you might have a bad day, but today's a bad day, but tomorrow there might be that little glimmer of light and it might be better. And it's exactly the same with, with what you're doing with Team Evie, like that really dark time for you, like when Evie died and you thought to yourselves, we need to do this. And that's kind of like the light, isn't it? The shining light. And she's a little shining light, isn't she?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That little smile just would light up a room. And I think light is just about, you know, it can, the sunshine, just a smile, like a touch, that light can be anything. And it just is kind of how I kind of think about my life. Like sometimes, it can be really hard, but actually there will be that little glimmer of something more positive at the end of it. So it's thinking about like that, like positive kind of end as well. That's my little. So yeah, at the end of darkness, there'll come light.
What a lovely way to end. That's really nice to think
Thank
about.
you. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Gillian. It's been amazing chatting through everything with you, and hopefully, it's been enlightening, informative, interesting to everyone listening. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Yes, it's been. Oh, Greg, you're amazing. You really are. I think you're. I just love what Team Evie does and what it brings to not only PICU but all the other. I follow you on Facebook. I'm really proud of you, actually.
Oh, oh, that's lovely to hear.
And
Thank
I
you so
think,
much.
and it's just like, you've got your lovely family, and I'm sure that there's other families that you touch that you just help like get that light. So well done to you guys too.